All right, all right. So my last theory, where everyone wasn't real, it didn't do too well in terms of the comments and people agreeing with me. Did well in views. That was nice. I appreciate that. And we're chugging along, but yeah. I don't know. It was just nice to be theorizing again, kind of like it's the early 2000s all over again. It's something I appreciate. So anyway, I got this new theory.
What's that? Huh. Radio. What's going on with that radio?
I don't think people really truly comprehend the scope of power Silent Hill has. And in one of my many arguments in the last theory I had, I was told that Silent Hill is not a force that has wants, needs, or any sort of agenda or desire. And to that I disagree. I disagree so much that this theory was born from it, and the inspiration actually came from Howard Blackwood. Now, for those who don't remember, Howard Blackwood was the enigmatic mailman from Downpour. He just showed up and kind of helped Pendleton through what was going on, giving him cryptic advice, rather, and kind of leading him to his next target destination. And I thought it occurred to me, number one, why the hell is he in a Wild West comic book version of Silent Hill? And then number two, why is he here? But number three, could it be that Silent Hill has a guide, I guess, if you will? Kind of taking each main character through Silent Hill for one purpose or another, for some unforeseen goal. It started with his purpose as a mailman, and then it kind of, I'll be honest with you, it kind of exploded from there. To which I titled this new theory, the Silent Hill Guide Paradigm. Let's jump into it, shall we? You see, despite having 97 sequels all made by different developers and pachinko machines and what have you, and even an arcade cabinet that is hilarious, there's one common factor between all of them, and it's the town itself. The town itself seems to be the only focal point that seems to be concurrent with each iteration. And one of the ways that it exerts its power and continues with its planning, and I do say its planning as if the town is the one doing the planning, is a guide. I call it the Silent Hill Guide Paradigm. And it revolves around the idea that no matter what in any Silent Hill or with any new visitor into Silent Hill, there always seems to be some sort of guide that follows the protagonist around, or a target, and follows the target around, allowing them to kind of direct where the person goes in the storyline, but not in a matter of just a way of getting narrative, directions, which, I mean, it will be for that as well, but the main goal of it is to keep the character or target on their charted course so that Silent Hill can show them what they wanted to show them. This is represented in each and every Silent Hill with a veritable guide leading the main character on a charted course that seems to end, and once that course ends, the guide either dies or kind of dissolves from the plot line. And this happens every single time. As we go through the plot line, you're going to start to notice that after the guides have completed their purpose, sure enough, they're gone. There's no reason or point for them to be around anymore. So either Silent Hill takes them back, or the main character actually has to kill them. They become a boss battle or something of that effect. Or even better yet, one of the other characters kills that character. But either way, once their purpose is fulfilled, Silent Hill has no more use for them. The guide paradigm ends. And this isn't a static system where said character is an agent of Silent Hill and they do the bidding of Silent Hill, and then once their purpose is done, they die. It's nothing like that. It's far more nuanced and far more driven in different directions depending on which Silent Hill you're in, but no matter what, it always seems to have that same common factor, and we'll get into it. And the best way to get into it, so far that I've realized, is chronological order, because it kind of displays just the kind of reach Silent Hill had, and also it
it shows the attempt Silent Hill had at having different kinds of variations in what they were using as a tool to get the point across to the protagonist, generally. So let me use some examples and we'll go from there, and you guys will know what I'm talking about. And tell me what you think in the comments. By the way, like and subscribe if you like what you're hearing here. If you like to hear me just babble on about crackpot theories, I'm of the mind that we should still be using our brain power to come up with some good theories for Silent Hill. It was left vague for about 25 years, and while everybody has come to the consensus that we shouldn't have to theorize because the plot is there, I disagree. I think there's still more room for us to kind of, sit down and thumbtack some strings to a board and get crazy. But yeah. Okay, let's get started. Dahlia Gillespie would be our very first guide. And this guide is very interesting because this is a pawn with its own intentions as well. She wanted to see the birth of her god in her cult, and the only way to make that happen was to exploit the powers of an outside force. That outside force happened to be her daughter, Dahlia Gillespie. Silent Hill has a bit of power here. However, the outside force is a unknown part of this factor, and that was the fact that the spiritual abilities of Alessa were almost considered interference unless they were hampered down. So Dahlia was the one to ensure that the abilities from Alessa were contained and used in the right way. If left to her own devices, Alessa could have been anything. She could have been the final boss for, I don't know, her own Silent Hill franchise or something to that effect. However, once those abilities were kind of bottled up, they were then used as a conduit to summon the final god. However, in order to completely utilize these powers, it required Cheryl. And since Cheryl was the daughter of Harry Mason, Dahlia is now in charge of kind of directing Harry Mason on his way to make Alessa and Cheryl one person once more. Okay, I won't get into the plot line of Silent Hill 1. If you haven't played Silent Hill 1, you shouldn't be in this video at all, really. So that's entirely up to you. I do have a explanation of the very first Silent Hill in my video library, but in the meantime, this is an example of the lightest form of the manipulation of Silent Hill itself, as Dahlia was being fed this information on how to birth God, something she assumed she wanted, when come to find out birthing this god would end up leading to her demise. However, she played the part and she played the role well. Believing that she was some sort of double agent Ada Wong style, she not only utilized the abilities of her daughter, but she then utilized the powers of Silent Hill in order to birth this god. The problem with this was, the entire time, the idea that this god being born would bring about a paradise, when in fact you actually summon the damn devil. Yes, all guides in this theory are also plot devices, which is just a secondary, or maybe it's a primary feature of being a guide. It kind of keeps the main character on the straight and narrow. Without them, Harry Mason would have wandered to every edge of every street wondering why it's broken off and he's floating through space. However, there was a goal here. Her goal was to see God. Silent Hill's goal was to have this God born. Now, whether or not the two coincided or one thing happened first, Dahlia would not have gotten this information if it wasn't taught to the people or the cult of Silent Hill. And it's of my opinion that this is the lightest form of manipulation from Silent Hill, because this is just simply information that allowed her to become a pawn in this idea. It's not something that Silent Hill actively said, we need to go take control of Dahlia, and this is the only way we're going to get this to happen, so let's take over her brain. Instead, it was just information, and she became the earliest form of any guide that we have seen in media. Not in the timeline, but in media itself. This is also an example of her inadvertently becoming a guide. This isn't something she accepted, nor did she walk into. This is something that, upon learning the information and learning of the rituals, she became a pawn without needing to be coerced into it. Her manipulative guidance is crucial in driving the plot forward, but her clues and dire warnings are what compel Harry to go on his adventure. Therefore, he is the reason that Alessa and Cheryl become whole eventually at the end of the story. However, much like any guide that exists in the Silent Hill plotline, and I will keep going after I get done with her, she met an end. Once she got to see the god had struck her down. And this is what I meant by nuance, because this is not Dahlia Gillespie being, puppeteered into a situation where she could summon, the end of life as we know it. This time, the intentions of Dahlia Gillespie matched exactly what Silent Hill had wanted all along, and that was to kind of give life or become sentient. And the only way to do that was to have Alessa being used as a conduit to make that happen. Once all the dominoes were lined up in place, Silent Hill really didn't have to raise much of a finger, as Dahlia's intentions and side quests during the course of Silent Hill pretty much made that happen. This is the only time you'll get a primary example of Silent Hill interfering the least. However, because of the scriptures and knowledge and things of that sort, and the cult being manipulated into following this line of thinking all the way until the events of summoning the incubus altogether, in the end, all it took was a matter of belief and waiting. Alessa was the unknown factor that was added to the equation, but once a doorway was created by Alessa's existence, all they needed was someone to open the door, and it was Dahlia who opened the door with the help of Harry Mason. This is the most hands-off approach to the theory as a whole, but we can get into Silent Hill 2, and I can tell you how it gets a little more manipulative and a little more puppeteer-like as we go along. Now, Maria is an example of what happens when Silent Hill just makes a guide. Maria, in this case, is the construct required to become a guide for Silent Hill. And James, following a more linear path than he believes, in the process of figuring out what he's repressed and also ultimately coming to terms with what he's done. The only way that's going to happen is with the construction of Maria, a amalgamation of what he desired in a woman with what his wife was. You got to see both sides of the coin, and in various times when James had instances where Maria was in danger, you would see just how little care was placed into her well-being. And it wasn't for lack of trying, it was just as we went along with the story, her purpose was to show James exactly what he desired and how much he didn't want it. In the end, he still wanted Mary. In the end, he still wanted to apologize to Mary. In the end, he still wanted to have his last words with Mary. And her purpose was to kind of take him on this tour through Silent Hill, and along the way meeting all these funny little characters with tormented pasts and things like that. Nothing resonated quite as well as Maria getting into a number of different harrowing circumstances and then dying. This happened quite a few different times in the plotline itself, and it often became something that even James started to notice was a little off-putting, but he needed to see this happen, and the only way it was going to happen is if Silent Hill had created this guide to take him through Silent Hill. If Maria was not in Silent Hill 2 and you were dealing with just Eddie and Laura and Angela, the point and purpose of him even being there would be kind of lost, as he would just be dealing with a scary town with a bunch of crazy people in it, or people that had been through a bit of crazy life circumstances. But that would have been it. The message would not have been nearly as clear as having Maria walk around, him getting attached because it was something that he saw in his wife or something that he wanted to see in his wife, and then out of nowhere she dies for different circumstances or disappears for different circumstances. This also allowed him to finally come to the conclusion that he did not need her near the end because, well, he simply did not need her. He wanted his wife Mary, and he was over going through all of this mental circus, and here we are. Everyone else's purpose in the storyline had a bit more complexity to it, but this one was more in your face. This one was more constructed than any of the other ones. Your fights with Eddie and Laura disappearing by running off and things of that sort, and her not seeing the demons that lurk beneath and everything is all well and good. But having Maria as such a in-your-face example of what you wanted and you can now not have no matter how hard you try was just a easy way for Silent Hill to keep James on track, to keep him from veering off, to keep him from living in the delusion even more so. Without Maria, the delusion would have been strong, and he would have been far more defensive seeing Eddie, Angela, and Laura walking around. But then again, without Maria, there's no Laura, because there's no point for Laura to be there. This, of course, is hinging on the fact that my last theory is completely out the window, but, you know. But in the end, Maria is, in fact, a Silent Hill guide. She had a purpose, and when the purpose was fulfilled, that was it. She was no more. She ended. She ceased to be. If the guide in Silent Hill 2 was not successful, you get endings where he leaves with the guide, for instance, which I have 1,000 theories on what actually happens once he leaves with her in the car. My biggest assumption is he just goes in a loop and goes right back into town and deals with the loss all over again. However, if the guide is successful in its mission, in its creation, then he gets to get his final words, he gets to get his final punishment, and he dies in Silent Hill the way it should be after he is punished. Or perhaps that is his punishment. Either way, the guide fulfills its purpose and then disappears into, ethereal mist or whatever, thus concluding its entire mission for Silent Hill 2. And this is the most straightforward case of the guide having a purpose, a mission, doing it, and calling it a night. And none of the pesky side motivations or anything get in the way, because this thing that was created is a construct, and it was essentially made with only one use.
Now, Vincent is a very, very interesting case, because Vincent, much like Dahlia Gillespie, has been given this wealth of knowledge from the cult and the power of Silent Hill itself, just kind of gaining all this knowledge and learning about the ways of the belief that they hold dear, and has instead decided to turn it on its back because he simply is afraid of what he sees. He sees the corruption, he sees where everything is transformed, he sees just how bad it's gotten, and has decided against it. However, much like Claudia has decided to lead her on a path, much like Claudia has. The only difference is he had the foresight and intelligence to prepare her for the journey. Rather than set things up and orchestrate, he simply prepared her for her final journey in the hopes that not only would she not give birth to God, but also kill Claudia in the process. This is an example of what happens when a guide goes rogue. His purpose was intended to orchestrate, and instead, because of fear, it was outright fear of what was becoming of the world and Silent Hill as it was, his idea was, I have probably limited time, and the idea is now I'm going to prepare Heather for battle, to which he did in the best of his ability based on the knowledge he had. There were a few items and trinkets to bring along the way, and a few very vague and obscure references he would make to her, probably because it was his personality. Based on how he spoke with everyone in Silent Hill 3, we saw just how Vincent generally communicates, and so he did his best with Heather. He definitely wasn't the direct sort, so the idea of him going, hey, you know what, you're going to give birth to God, and that sucks, just didn't seem like it was going to come out of his mouth. However, in his own way, he explained that when the time comes, you will have the tools needed to make sure that this does not happen, and the reason was simple. He loved the world the way it was. He believed in the God, no doubt, but much like any other religion, there's always subsects of the religion, as well as people that simply go askew from the main and core belief. And Vincent was a poster child for that. Vincent was, true to his word, a guide for Silent Hill. But this time, it didn't require manipulation on Vincent's part. He was far too intelligent for that, so that wasn't happening. However, the knowledge should have been just enough to kind of coast Heather through and call it a night as the birth of God happened. Because of Vincent's interference, the opposite happened, and instead you got the final boss battle that still to this day is one of my favorites, by far the most symbolic. And this was with the help of a guide. So not all guides are going to take you through Silent Hill to just let you get to that sweet ending or be punished. And I realized this halfway in, there are guides that simply have a job to do and will do said job, and then there are guides who simply go against the grain, and Vincent has most certainly done this. Claudia would have been considered to be a guide. However, she's not really directing Heather. She's more along the lines of biding time. So having Heather in Silent Hill is enough. There just had to be a certain time and place where things could be ready and prepared. Vincent, in that time, had to find a way to weaponize her. And weaponize her he did, to be sure. Next up in Silent Hill 4, The Room, we have Joseph Schreiber. Now, Joseph is an interesting case because Joseph is a guide purely, and this is mechanics-wise, purely in notes and memos only. You spend a good while figuring out the plot line, but along the way you find random pages from the Crimson Tome, a tome that explains how to in fact stop the big bad Walter Sullivan and performing the 21 Sacraments ritual. Now, Joseph Schreiber is explaining how to, in effect, end this ritual, and all of it leads to numerous notes constantly dictating his findings in the cult, the order, finding different characters throughout Ashfield and Silent Hill. You learn a lot about the plotline. However, one thing you don't realize is that in listening to his information, you are actually fulfilling part of the prophecy for the 21 Sacraments ritual, as he is delivering knowledge to you and you become the receiver of knowledge. Once you become the receiver of knowledge, you are continuing the 21 Sacraments ritual. You did not know this, nor did I believe Joseph knew this either. He just continued to expel everything he could in plot form on pieces of paper. And once you read it, you continue to learn more and more, and it seemed innocent enough until the end when you realize that he is asking you to kill Walter, and it is the only way to stop this curse. I'm sorry, not curse. Why did I say curse? I don't know, I thought curse. It's the only way you can stop this ritual from happening. Unbeknownst to him, in doing so, in even learning this information, he became part of this ritual that much more. And in the end, it shows as you are climactically fighting Walter Sullivan, and you get to kill the big bad, and life is good and everything, and you assume that's it, when it comes to find out pretty much all the endings are bad. I think one ending is good, where you kind of get away and you visit Eileen in the hospital, last I checked, but for the most part, you're being guided by a man who doesn't even have a face. This is the first time in any of the Silent Hills where a guide simply doesn't even need to be there physically. There's word that he's dead, there's word that he's a ghost, there's word that you're getting the notes from the past, and or all of those. But you don't get to see Joseph, you just get to take his lessons that he's learned over time and then implement them into your merry adventure. And it's probably the easiest cut and dry case of being a guide in Silent Hill. The only problem here is not only do I believe that Joseph did not know he was a guide, but I also believe he did not know he was actually making things worse. And Walter was getting the upper hand just by you knowing things. Next, we have everyone's favorite Silent Hill, Homecoming, where we find that the guide here is simply Wheeler. Now, Wheeler is an interesting case because he's been a family friend with Alex and his father for some time, which means he knew all the goings-on far before Alex decided to repress said memories and live a life of obliviousness. While Wheeler is loudmouth and casually funny, and at moments can seemingly be paranoid, a lot of his fun times and slap happy sidekick action, that veneer seems to kind of peel away as you come to realize that if Alex is in fact lifelong friends or long-term friends with Wheeler, that means Wheeler is fully aware of everything Alex has done. That being said, the reason why Wheeler exists as a guide in this case is because this is a very temperamental situation where, yes, there was supposed to be an offering for the town, and yes, it was supposed to be Alex, but his brother died in his place. While that is a whole sub-story on its own, the story is actually about coming to terms with being guilty and something you had done, something that follows the same MO for every Silent Hill generally. So in the end, when Alex is fighting Amnion and finally fells the giant crazy beast lady, you're able to cut the monster open and find your little brother in there where you can finally make your peace. Had Wheeler not been there, the path would have been wrought with a number of different people being punished, and Alex being at the head of the table, he would have been the one to see it all. All of these things and imagery would have broken him without the sight of at least one friendly face to follow him around, guide him through, and even get caught a few times to kind of navigate him. The only reason Wheeler existed in this as a guide is so that he can lead him on the straight and narrow, taking him all the way to his battle with Amnion at the end. If it weren't for Wheeler, there would be no fight against Amnion. It would just be Alex being confused and frankly walking around like a dumbass the entirety of the game, not knowing where to go next. I'm saving the best for last because we now take it to Silent Hill Downpour. To this day, in terms of Western Silent Hills, it's probably my favorite. All the other remakes, movies, all that stuff, I think this is the best thing the West has done with the Silent Hill IP. However, let's get to the point at hand here. The guide for this game was Howard Blackwood. Now, they had the foresight to create comics that actually had the character Howard Blackwood, but in the Downpour game, Howard Blackwood was a postman who found the main character at various times and often guided him where to go with no foreseeable agenda, with no foreseeable need to tell him anything. However, he still did. Not only did he, but he kind of left it within your hands to decide what to do with that information. Not go fight the man and fight the good fight. Here's a few medallions. Go do it here. He quite literally gave instructions on how to get there. Now, it's no shocker that the writing definitely took a left turn once the Westerners took over for Silent Hill. But I will say this is probably the greatest thing they have contributed to the Silent Hill series, Howard Blackwood, because this now introduces a new idea. Silent Hill is powerful, yes, but on its own, it may not be nearly as powerful. Therefore, you're going to need almost an avatar to walk around and represent you. And Silent Hill did just that with Howard Blackwood. It's my suspicion that Howard Blackwood is, in fact, Silent Hill itself, in the form of a Cheshire cat, if you will. It guides you, says a few puzzling things, and then just goes about its business and lets fate decide what the next step is. While performing rituals and summoning gods is, don't get me wrong, one of the reasons why 1 and 3 are still my favorite Silent Hills, this is a standalone project with a standalone story, and it doesn't really have much else to do with anything. And I believe that's the only way Silent Hill can go now. I think Silent Hill should be I believe Silent Hill should honestly be like the Twilight Zone, where every episode you watch are just some outlandish story under the same premise. This is a alternate world. And there you go. However, they have to stick to the same ground rules. But anyway, I digress. So Howard Blackwood spent the entirety of Silent Hill Downpour just, in terms of leading, top notch. Because he didn't have a dog in the fight. And at first it seemed like an innocent enough postman who was stuck in Silent Hill, but for those that had played the game for so long, we kind of sat there with an eyebrow raised because we knew the deal. We knew how this worked. There was no chance that Howard was going to be anything more than some crazy entity. I do believe, in fact, that Blackwood was constructed, much like in the Born from a Wish scenario where Silent Hill created Maria based on a few memories. In this case, I think Silent Hill just made him. They made him, and he came to be, and they used him as a walking avatar to kind of guide you through. He's kind of a help desk kiosk, if you will. There is no twist to this theory. There is no, hey, by the way, he's a guide because haha, and then I jump out at you. There's nothing to that. This is more of a reflection on the narrative of Silent Hill in any of its iterations. I'm trying to find, no matter what, maybe there is none, maybe there is. I just I miss the days of theorizing and things like that. But there was a time when all we did was theorize because we were left with next to nothing. Now we have certain tweets and things like that, some downloadable content, a PDF file from a comic book long ago, and we're kind of patching it together, and then people kind of nod and say, okay, this is now canon. I get that. But I'm looking for the questions that are still unanswered, even after all these years. How powerful is Silent Hill? Just what is the extent of what it can do and what it can create? Can it create life? Can that life exist outside of Silent Hill? Are you actually outside of Silent Hill if you think you've left? I think Howard Blackwood is a first step forward when it came to just how powerful Silent Hill could be. We dealt with a lot of conduits and a lot of people that were power sources or batteries for Silent Hill's magics and things like that. We even heard backstories of, dating back to World War IIs and things like that. And I get that, but we never actually got to field test just what this town could do. And Blackwood, and let me just tell you, Blackwood, when he started off, everyone had the same assumption. He's just a guy that's trapped in town too. He's just like everyone else. But he's so knowledgeable in the town that I thoroughly believed that he was. After maybe 2 or 3 meetings with the character, even I said as a kid, I was like, this is, I say as a kid, but the game came out in 2012. So, I mean, just how young was I? Anyway, his knowledge was crazy for a guy who just got stuck in town as compared to all the other ones. For how on the nose Blackwood's help was to Pendleton, it leads me to believe that this journey to self-discovery or redemption or even discovering your own past would not have happened, or Silent Hill was under the impression it would not have happened without the assistance of having some sort of avatar speak with him. There was no way that he would have got it on his own, or he would have regressed into something that was counterproductive to the whole message behind him coming to the town. So when Murphy gets to the town, they immediately assign a stewardess, a assistant, a whatever you want to call it, to kind of guide him through and point where to go. This would be the most hands-on Silent Hill has ever been in either manipulating or even just communicating with any of the inhabitants in the town. And I, for one, believe that there should be more of it. I think with every Silent Hill, there should be someone actively explaining to the character themselves, because the biggest thing I've noticed in every Silent Hill game, and I love Silent Hill dearly, is their discovery of how they got there, their past, how they came to be, why they deserve to be punished, and everything like that comes in flavorful little clues and hints and things of that sort that the fans themselves can speculate after and go, that makes sense, and they can talk to each other and, theorize and everything. But the characters in-game, not so much. In-game, there's always a crashing halt. There's obliviousness, and then the last hour or the last half hour is absolute crashing halt. This is what happened. Turns out you blew up a school bus or whatever the case may be. And that's been for any Silent Hill that required the punishing of any protagonist, except for Harry. Harry can do no wrong. That's how that works. He's Harry Mason. Just deal with it, all right? Anyway, there's a crashing halt, and maybe it's just the writing from back then. So when I hear about remakes and things like that, I get excited because I say, okay, now we have writers knowing what they know now, and let's see how they take it on. And you can tell me that modern audiences, blah, 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 you can get political, you can say woke and all that other stuff. But I'm interested in seeing how the story can be rewritten in a fashion that not only makes sense, still nuanced, but it doesn't leave that question that lingers where I'm wondering to myself, how does the main character know any of this? Or why did they find out so abruptly? Why did everything just change for them immediately? It's like you're playing two different characters. Whether it's James finding out about Mary, whether it's Alex finding out about his little brother. Like, these things can't just happen in the end. The formula is now stale, and we know what to expect. And I, for one, as nostalgic as I am, I do not want to see this replicated again. There has to be a woven story narratively that I can listen to, watch, read, whatever the case may be, where, fine, if you're going to leave some questions, but I do not want the character finding out the truth the way they do. Now, the guide theory that I proposed here may be a stretch, but I'm starting to realize that if there's a guide for every story, they're going to kind of spoon feed the plot line to every Silent Hill fan as well as every protagonist. Maybe we don't need a guide. Maybe you need to find out by simply facing some villains, facing yourself, some self-narration, whatever the case may be. There are various ways to find out. I don't think we need a guide. I think a guide hinders the storyline. And more importantly, I think the guide comes off as the little kid who sees all the ghosts in the horror movie. You know the trope, right? Ugh. I'm done with that. Anyway. So that's my take on that. Anyway, so that's what I think, and that's what I've put together based on everything I've seen from Silent Hills. You'll notice I've left out Origins and the arcade game and the pachinko machine. Yeah, you know what? Use your own imagination. If you're not impressed with everything I've listed here, that's fine. But more importantly, just for the sake of talking and having a back and forth, you guys in my comment section have been nuts. Go in there and let me know what you think of this idea. Let me know if it's half done, half baked, crazy, stupid, a lie? I don't know. Just come up with something. I like to talk about it. I like to have my back and forth with it, and you guys have not disappointed, and I appreciate you. Also, be sure to check out my other videos covering a multitude of different Silent Hill videos, including one where I interview the producer of Silent Hill Ascension. Yeah, that really happened. That really, really happened. So take a look there. In the meantime, you guys need me. You know where to find me. I'll catch you in the next video, and have a good night.
What's that? Huh. Radio. What's going on with that radio?